I'm gonna start with a comment from a friend of mine, colleague Ned Marks with Terrain Resources in Western Kansas. If you ain't testing, you're guessing. And now, granted, I'm coming from the laboratory sense, but how do you know how to respond to that problem? Fouling can be an aesthetic issue because the well was offline. Something in the transmission lines is fouled. It can be an aging issue. It can be mechanical, sediment infiltration, or remnant drilling fluids. Biological, mineral, corrosion, can be a host of issues. And in fact, it's funny, in the vernacular, well fouling means one thing on one side of the state line or even one part of the county and different in the other, and same with response. And our industry is first throw chlorine at it, and if that doesn't work, then we'll usually throw chlorine again, and then start to wonder why it's not working. Testing can be very expensive, and you look at the required testing that's done on a municipal well, that's a big expense for the utility. It doesn't have to be in figuring out those problems. A handful of tests that are tied to well health, hardness, quantifying or getting a population of the bacteria. We don't have to look for the end points of regulatory limits, because at that point we're failing. But we can look beforehand. And then, as I mentioned earlier, most drillers know their backyard. We know, we've got an iron issue here. Or let's say they're down in the southeast, the water's corrosive. So it's, they can change up how they respond and how they test. And then from that, you can tailor your response. With that information, a couple $100 in testing, that can tell you, is this a mechanical problem? Are we going to need to run acid? Is it simple chlorination? Is it a redevelopment issue? And sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of the owners and operators in our industry, they like to run to the point of failure. And so the tests are going to tell you, well, you're bringing back the dead. And so it could be pretty involved. But better to know that when you roll up on site, so you're prepared, than attempt something, have it fail, repeat, or try something else. And, we want to use what's convenient. I mean, even when I'm doing a repair around my house, I've got my go-to bucket of tools. Sometimes I actually need the full toolbox, but it's easier when it's just me running back and forth. But when you've got to take a rig and direct people out there and bring resources in from out of state, maybe the products and so forth, it takes a little more scheduling. And so knowing what you're going against is significant. And the other side of it is, what can we expect with this well? We spend X amount of money to rehabilitate it, and we bring back the production, or we address the aesthetic issue. How much longer does that well have? So when we couple testing with a video survey and a pump test, and then look at longevity of wells in the area and the materials of construction, we can say to the owner, you need to plan the next 2-3 years, you're going to have to replace it. Or we've done everything we can, we need to pivot and look at a new drill site now. So there's a lot more to it. And when we look at the challenges of the industry, the role water plays and resources across the board, I think we've got to be more proactive. And, that testing periodically and even getting boots on the ground and looking at the produced water quality and what challenges the operator's having there, all that weaves into diagnosing that problem and then directing the right response so that we're not jeopardizing that well and we can get a longer operational life. But then also start to plan, because a new well is not cheap. Whether it's a homeowner or a large municipality, you've got the cost of construction, the cost of the materials, infrastructure changes, maybe land purchases, developing out that water right. And so there's a lot to go on. And if you have an idea of what's going wrong with that well now, then you can factor that into the design and move into a planning stage. It's generally a lot more proactive, a lot more cost effective too.